Welcome to the MHP Exchange podcast, where industry veterans Frank Rizzo and Eric Busadil generously share their wealth of knowledge in their new podcast dedicated to the manufactured housing space. They tackle tough questions to provide valuable insights for those considering investments in mobile home parks. If you're seeking answers in the manufactured housing space, this podcast is your go-to resource.
You've tuned in to another episode of the MHP Exchange podcast. Frank Rizzo here today. Eric is not with me, but we do have a special guest that's going to be joining us. But before we get to that and we introduce him, one of the key reasons that we created the MHP Exchange and we've done this podcast was to be a collaboration between owners and operators and investors in the space and become a platform where we could share ideas, where we could talk about deals, and where we can give insight. And our next guest had actually reached out to us because of, and I know him specifically because of this podcast, which was great. And I've had the opportunity to meet with him. And on a recent trip down into Alabama, we met with Eric and I had met with John Evans from Six Rock Properties to go over just some deals that we were looking at together and to share some insights in the markets that we're both in. So with that, I want to give a warm welcome to John Evans from Six Rock Properties. And for those of you who do not know who John is, and you've probably seen him out there because he's been on a number of podcasts and been on a number of different social media platforms. He is the Chief Project Officer for Six Rock. He's involved in over 600 lots spanning 17 different communities in North Carolina mostly, but he's based out of Alabama. And I want to welcome John to the program. How are you today, John?
Good. I appreciate you inviting me on the show here.
Well, I wanted you to come on here. I mean, one, we kind of developed a relationship where we've talked about different deals and insights into the markets, number one, but number two, I think your story is so, relevant to what people or investors or people interested in the space are looking for. I mean, you have a story where you've transitioned or been able to transition from a W-2 employee to investing alongside of or with operators in the space to now you've kind of pivoted out, essentially living the American dream. And when you're not enjoying the Gulf Shores of Alabama, you're out there looking at ways to deploy your own capital, which quite frankly is what is that's the goal. I mean, that's why people want to invest in real estate. They want to be able to become the CEO of Me Inc. And you're doing it. So, I think that your story is so important to share. And that's one of the reasons why we're so glad to have you here.
Yeah, I mean, just some of the things that people don't realize that when they do this or have a thought of doing it, that their initial thought is, well, what all can I gain? Which is normal, but what all can I gain? How money and all these things, and it's good. Don't get me wrong, but sometimes they forget about the things that you're going to have to give up first in order to get there. So back at my W-2 job, when I was trying to first kind of get in and I would buy a park, I basically sold a lot of stuff I had, a nice vehicle and just other things that wasn't really adding to my net worth, so I got rid of stuff in order to have enough cash to buy a property, where other people still enjoyed, their weekends and going out on a boat and having fun and all this stuff, where I had to kind of get rid of certain things in my life to get to that point,
I'm so glad you say that, because people tend to believe, or they look at, owning real estate or owning something like, wow, you're so lucky, you're so fortunate, you have that. And I have a friend of mine that would say, the only place that success comes before work is in the dictionary. So you talk about having to give up in the beginning, right? The sacrifices you had to make to get to where you wanted to be. How was that where you had to, just talk about the time sacrifice, because, you were running a job full time with expectations from your employer, but now you realize that, hey, I need to do something more. I need to supplement my income. I need to create another stream of income for me. So how did you manage that time, and what did you do to make sure that investment worked?
I mean, the main thing is if you're starting out, I think you need to have a property that's close. I mean, like right now, my properties are several states away, but at first, the first property I bought was literally right across the street from where I worked at. So after work or even at lunch, I could go over there and fix, an air conditioning unit or something. So I would say that would be number one. Try and look in your backyard, so to speak.
Okay.
You know. So even on weekends, if you're off on the weekend, you could drive to the park and do something.
Got it. So your first deal, you were managing yourself. You were obviously taking care of yourself. Walk me through that a little bit. Like, how big was the deal? What was what was your underlying reason for acquiring it? What drew you to? Because if anybody knows your story, I mean, this was really your first venture into real. I mean, other than your primary residence, this was your first venture into investment real estate, which is a little outside the norm. Most people kind of find their way into mobile home parks because they've done a series of other investments, but you just went straight into the MHP space.
Yeah, basically, I even bought a mobile home park before I bought a personal residence. So the first property I ever bought was a mobile home park.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, but it's funny. I wanted to buy a property and I was looking, but I really didn't know how to look. I would look online, back then it was Craigslist. I would even surf on Craigslist, or, realtors or whoever, at that time, I didn't really know all this technology we have now to find deals, so I'm driving to work and I see this guy's got a bandit sign in the yard of this park and it says for sale, and his number's on there. So I call him up and we strike a deal, and he owner financed it.
That's the great thing about this business in general. It's by making those contacts with the sellers, or just making those contacts with people, that's where the opportunity arises. You sit there and you reach out to the seller. How does that go? Like, what's that conversation? Is he comfortable with the fact that you've never bought a park before? Like, how do you convince him to take the shot on you rather than, go with somebody else?
Yeah, I think, well, as far as that first deal, the place that I worked at, he had retired from there. So I think that right there was almost kind of like an initial bonding moment. We had something in common.
Mm-hmm.
We did the similar type of work. And he lived nearby, and he was very willing to help me, make the deal work, So it was funny. The day, it was all park-owned homes. And the day we closed, we're in the parking lot and his phone rings as a tenant, I'm thinking, oh man, here we go with all these problems coming up. But he stepped in right there that day, went to the park, and we addressed the issues. So, that's one of the good things about mom and pop. I feel like they're generally very willing to help you succeed,
I think by far and large, I don't think that we've encountered a seller of a community, maybe one back early on, who was, and they were in distress. So it was a different kind of situation. But by far and large, I think you're right, John. I think what we found in this space, and different from other asset classes, is that not only the original owners, but a lot of the operators themselves are willing to share ideas on best practices because, quite frankly, there has been such a pivot here, and we do want to raise the bar, in terms of how these communities are being run and looked at, right? And so having well-run communities requires collaboration between owners, sharing ideas, sharing best practices, and how we can create efficiencies and create value for the residents. But that first park, obviously, what were the biggest challenges that you had there? I mean, not knowing anything about the space, kind of not even having other, anything to color your mind in terms of another, real estate asset class that you were involved in. What were some of the biggest learning lessons from that first park that kind of stayed with you?
I guess that, you need a budget on the front end. That one was literally no underwriting, at that point. That was just, I took the expenses that he had versus the loan, and here's the buffer in between,
Wow.
Yeah, that's how I did it. It was only 8 lots. It was
okay.
a park across the street from where I worked. So it was, wouldn't have been a huge disaster, but it's not like I was budgeting for CapEx, et cetera, like I do now, but I was just kind of winging it, so to speak,
action sometimes is the best educator.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm somebody who I think learns best by being involved in the project. Right. And you can learn a lot from, obviously, you want to get all that information that you can. But for me, I think my life has always been by doing, right, and getting involved in that. That has been giving me the best information or experience that I can now share or use again. So at buying a park like that, getting your hands dirty, you kind of realize what you want to do and what you don't want to do, right? So what you want to do is you want to make sure you have a budget going in and you plan for CapEx. But overall, I mean, do you still own that park, or was that something that you at some point said, "Hey, look, I'm looking to pivot and go on to bigger and better things"? Like how did that play out for you?
Yeah, so I bought that park, and that was in 2015, and so I ran the park, successfully. It really wasn't a headache. It wasn't that bad. So less than a year later, I found another park that was maybe less than a mile from my house. So I had 2 properties, that I could run, and it was the same deal. The guy's got a sign in the yard. He didn't even have his number on there. So I knocked on a resident's door, and they told me where he lived. So I went to his house, and, we talked about it. And we knew some of the same people. So again, he owner financed it. He didn't want to. I went to every bank in town. Nobody wanted to give me a loan. So he ended up financing that one. So I only kept that park for a few months. So I sold both of those, and then I had some cash.
Got it. Okay.
And I still wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. So probably about a year went by before I really did anything. I was scratching my head trying to figure out, what I should do. And so that's when I did the Frank and Dave boot camp.
Okay.
So, and on there they talked about SECO, the Southeast Community Owners. So that's what I did. I went to that and just networked and met people and just decided I was just going to dive in, basically,
So at that point you made the decision, and for those of you listening who haven't been to SECO, that is a conference that I think if you're going to own and operate, and I don't even think you need to specifically be in the Southeast, because there is a good learning bit that you can get and you can take elsewhere if you're in the Midwest. But that's a conference that we look to attend every year. I think they put on a good show, and it's a great networking opportunity. MHI is another great one that we look to attend as well. But so now you go there and you decide that you're going to dive in, right? You're this is where you want to be. You've had some success with 2 communities. You obviously were profitable, but now you know you're around the edges and you're going to go do a deeper dive. Is that when you hooked up with Six Rock? Are you still doing things? Were you still doing things on your own? Like, what was your pathway from there?
Yeah, I basically talked to a lot of people, a lot of brokers, and just everybody. And eventually it just they gave me a lot of referrals. And so that's when I called my partner, Chris, currently with Six Rock. And basically he said, I think at that time he probably owned maybe about 700 or 800 lots, maybe a little bit more. But he was based in North Carolina, and he said, if you can find a deal, we'll partner. And so that's what I did. I just started, looking right there in his backyard. So,
and what you do, and I think you do very, very well, right? And I think people have challenges with, you have a knack of finding a lot of off-market deals, right? You've built a portfolio completely off-market. And I'm not talking like broker off-market. I'm talking connecting with those sellers. I mean, why do you think you've been so successful with that? Because, a lot of people have challenges or issues or getting through that initial roadblock because these owners are getting called by 1,000 people. But every time I talk to you, you're talking about, you've got 4 or 5 owners that are looking to sell, and they've got a relationship with you. Like, what do you think has been your success with that?
I think it's a few things. One is like probably maybe the type of property, one, and second, maybe the size. If it's much over 100 lots, I just let brokers handle that part, but 100 lots and less, for one. And two, I feel like mom and pop are still kind of blue collar. They're business people, but they still fall into that blue collar category where pop is probably running a tractor, fixing water leaks, and mom handles the phones, so I feel like I can just kind of relate to mom and pop because that's, kind of what I did,
Yeah.
And when you're calling mom and pop, don't just say, "Oh, hey, do you want to sell your park?" That's not how I approach them, on the way in. I try and say something familiar, especially if I'm calling in an area that I already own in.
Okay.
I might not even mention selling the park at all on the first call. I might follow up later and kind of say something or something familiar, or even offer them some type of help, if they need help with something, or because they don't know all of the secrets that we know as far as water meters, rent manager, whatever, But I still want to leave a little meat on the bone when I buy the park, but I still try and offer help somehow,
John, it's so funny you say that because, and you said it earlier in this, and I think this is just part of what your, I guess your whole model, right? Because you talk about what you've got to give to get.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, when they speak to property owners, it's like, what can I get right now? Right. And I want to buy the property right now. Right. And they don't realize that this is very much a relationship business.
Mm-hmm.
And if you really want to find an off-market opportunity, those mom and pop sellers have, they have a vested interest in the grounds. Like, I've met a lot of sellers who they're still going to be in that community, and they're tied. Their reputation is tied to that community. Their whole persona is tied to that, and they want to make sure that the person they're talking to about it is going to have that same care, love, and respect of the community than they did when maybe they built it, right? And that's important for them. And if you just take the approach of, are you interested in an offer? Well, there's going to be an initial pushback.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we look to do, if I go into a community that we just, we entered in, we'll reach out to other property owners, just like introduce ourselves. Like, hey, John, we just bought this park here. I want to be a resource for you. We're here. And, if anything changes, just give me a call. Like if something in your life changes and you decide to put the park on the market, just let me be the first call. Let me be the last call. Right. That's all I can ask. Right. And you find out what's best for you. But in the interim, I want to be your friend and see how we can, how we can work. I can help you out if you could, or you can, be of assistance if we have that. I mean, is that kind of like your approach?
Yeah. I mean, even if you never buy their park, it's still not a bad idea to know them and be in the community, and offer assistance however you can,
Sure.
So just put the value out there,
So John, I'll share a story. I mean, Eric and I bought a park in Douglas, Georgia, and it was one of probably our most successful parks that we were involved in, off market. When we met with the owner, and he had the 70-acre property with a lake that he built, and he had a cabin on the other side, which was his like man cave, like when he went to go hunt with the guys. And before we even bought the property and we were going down there, I mean, he allowed us to stay on the property, as crazy as that was, right? So we would stay on the property. We built a relationship, and it took a year and a half for him to make that decision. But then when that year and a half happened and he was getting calls from people, out of state, and he just said, finally, he came back to me, he was like, hey, can you match this number? And if we can match this number, we can have the property. And that's how we got a great deal off market. He got fair value, he got the number that, which was for him fair. And we got a value that we felt that was fair, and it worked out for him and it worked out for us. So there's a lot of value in what you're saying in building that relationship with the owner. So how long have you been now? And let's just say this. At what point did you say, hey, I could get rid of my W-2, my 9 to 5, and now I'm going to focus on this? Like, at what point did you do that?
Well, it's still day by day, I guess, but I wanted to do it a long time ago. And I would say that if this is something that you really want to do, you should do it as quickly as possible. Maybe even slightly before you're ready to do it, but with me, I think it was a lot easier than most people, because the type of job I had was like, we call them turnarounds, just like a mobile home park. You turn it around. Mm-hmm. It's in the gas and oil. So we go on site, the place is a disaster. We fix it, get it running, and then that job is over. Those jobs last anywhere from, a week to 3 months. But when that job's over, it's over. You're off, so.
Okay.
So I could come and go very easily.
Got it.
Most people, don't have a job like that. So that was kind of my unfair advantage,
We won't tell anybody about that.
Yeah, we'll leave that part out. But yeah, somebody that had a normal job that has been there for 20 years, that would probably be tough just to dive off,
Sure. But you've been in this space now for almost a decade, right? From your first park?
Yeah, I don't really consider it that long. I have, but back then it was just like something I did on the side.
Okay.
I didn't really have any huge aspirations to own 1,000 lots and do this full time. I just thought I was going to buy a few parks, increase my income, mm-hmm. maybe have a little retirement, but I didn't know if I knew then what it could turn into, I really would have pushed harder,
So what can it turn into for John Evans now? Like, what's the goal for John Evans now?
It's really hard to pin down exactly. I'm kind of looking more like on a timeline basis, I guess.
Okay.
Because I feel like, these mom and pop deals are they're not going to be here forever. I mean, some people even say 5 years. I don't know, but
so I think that's a very important point that you're making there, John. I think that you have a lot of capital that is looking for a home in the manufactured housing space, and unlike other real estate assets, right, or asset classes, there is a finite number of mobile home parks in this country, right? So there's somewhere between 43 and 44,000 parks, no more. And even though they're building a few big parks, right? Some people go, we close more parks than we open. So net, we're down parks every year, right? That's just what's happening. So you have capital that's on the sidelines and private equity family offices where they're used to writing these bigger checks for these deals. They just don't exist in this space. And I think they're coming to the realization now. They're coming to the realization that the best way to find a home is to be working with operators with experience who might have scale in certain regions to get them to the type of check size that they want to write. Like they don't want to write a check size for, $500,000 to $1 million. They want to write a $10 million check. Yeah. But you to do that in the MHP space, you might have to group together 5 or 6 parks, right? Like that's the way it works. Yeah. So to your point, those smaller parks or those mom and pop parks are slowly disappearing, right? Yeah. And they're becoming more institutionally or professionally owned. So, with that being said, like how, where you're involved in like 600 or lots, 17 communities. Do you have a timeline of what you're looking to do? Like, is it 5 years you're looking to acquire? Like, what is your end goal for John Evans?
The end goal would probably be 10-ish years from now.
Okay.
Maybe an exit on the southeastern portfolio, I guess. But I mean, it would be really nice to keep something generational,
Got it.
If I could eventually end up with something on my own to pass on, to the next generation. But it's so hard to pin down,
Yeah, that's it's always a challenge. We do the work. We want to make sure that our second and third generations enjoy the work and the labor that we've done. But in your roughly a decade of experience here, I'm sure you've learned a lot and you look at deals differently today than you did when you first started, right? What are the key drivers? Like, how do you look at underwriting a deal now, right? Like, do you look at whether the park owned or tenant owned? Like, do you look at CapEx? Like, what is your formula for success in the space?
I think it's mainly it's almost like you're going off of comps, really. Like, can you get an undervalued asset in a really nice area with other professional operators? That way you can really have an edge, It's like the park we have right now. We should close early April in Tuscaloosa.
Okay.
Just a really nice area with high rent comps,
So what's this park that you're getting ready to buy? You could share some of the details on it because you're in contract, right? So how many lots is the park?
It's currently 60.
Okay.
It actually has been zoned for 85, and it actually already has a plan in place for 85 lots.
Okay. So those 60 lots, how many of them are occupied?
There's 44 occupied.
Are they tenant owned or park owned homes?
They're all tenant owned.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Is that what you look for? You look for traditionally tenant owned homes, or will you consider park owned homes as well?
I mean, I guess they both have kind of their upsides, if it's all park owned, it's a little bit harder, of course, to finance, but you can kind of set your lot rent, so to speak, internally, if it's all park owned. But we always convert. We always convert if possible to all tenant owned. I mean, you'll always end up with a home here and there sometimes, but we're probably like 98% tenant owned.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, look, you do want to create that pathway to home ownership.
Yeah.
Because that pride of ownership is real for the residents there on the ground, and it does have an impact on the community itself. Now, this park that you're buying, I mean, how is the infrastructure? Is it well and septic? Is it city water, city sewer? What's the road quality?
It's direct bill water, and it's like a commercial grade septic, where like all of the lines run to the very end of the property into the same septic system.
Okay.
It's one giant commercial grade system that.
So you have a large flow system there. Got it. So, now how is that going to impact the infill? Are you planning to put in, because when you have a large flow development, it's a separate, it's a separate permitting process. What's there is there, but are you going to put in, and for those of you out there listening who don't know what we're talking about, because I know we're getting very granular, but when you're buying a park, things that you need to look at is your infrastructure. It's so critical. And there's so many different variations. And they all, to me, I look at them, they're all a question of value, right? I will pay more for city water, city sewer. That doesn't mean I will not do septic. It means that I will just discount the price because I know that there's maybe some CapEx that I will have to do, right? That's how we look at it, right? But when you have a large flow system, which is typically 10,000 gallons or more, it's a different level of permitting inside the state. And then you would, it's a elongated process and some additional engineering work. Yeah. So when we're talking about this now, and if you're listening out there and you're taking notes, and I know you are, then John has, another 16 lots that he's looking to fill. Are you going to put them on the large flow system, or do you account for, breaking them off and putting in some individual septics for those lots?
Well, the way it's currently engineered for 60 currently.
Okay.
Yeah. So when we do the 16 infill, there hopefully should be no issue, but it's engineered for that. So, and then the space beside those field lines or leach fields, whatever you want to call them, there's an additional block of land that has already been engineered and allocated for the additional flow to get to 85 units.
Got it.
And then right beside the property to the back, we've got an additional space of vacant land. If there was ever an issue, we could basically branch off and go that way.
Got it. Okay. So you found this deal. This looks like it's a value add deal, but there's a stabilized portion to it with the tenant owned homes already there. So are you looking at this and buying this on a cap rate basis? Is that one of the parameters you're looking at? The existing cash flow? Or are you buying this on the, opportunity basis where it's more, it's cheaper by the pound? Like, how do you look at this?
This deal, I guess you could say cap rate, because it's cash flows day one.
Beautiful.
Because, after the, rent increase, and one of the ways it does is because of the owner financing. We've got 6% interest only for 5 years.
Wow. Okay.
So that buys us all that time, So phase 2 would be try to go from 60 to 85,
And this was another off-market deal that you cultivated.
This is actually the first broker deal that I will have done.
Wow. Okay. So 18 communities, about time that you leverage one of the brokers that are out there in the space.
Yeah. Well, I'm just a partial owner on 5 communities. The others are basically what my partner had to begin with. And so he basically has relationships with brokers and wholesalers, and that's what he does. Where I'm just kind of, pounding the phones and finding mom and pop.
Yeah. Listen, there's a value to each. And I always tell people, especially when they're starting out, I mean, you obviously have a skill and a knack of talking with people and making them feel comfortable, which is not everybody necessarily has that skill naturally. Some people have to work on it. But you have that ability, right? I could tell just from talking with you that you feel very, at ease. But there's a value, especially starting out, where brokers could be a great resource for you. And there's a number of really good brokers in this space that we can name. Some of them that have, we've had on, whether it's Armin Violi, Charlie Castellano, Alex Willer, Hunter LaRocca. I mean, there's a number of brokers, and Will Capone. I mean, there's a number of people that you could use. that can offer you insight into the market. But this sounds like it's going to be a great deal for you. I'm interested to hear about the turnaround aspect on it. Like, how much are you budgeting for CapEx here?
Well, just to make an offer on the park, we said 300,000 just to have that cushion to make an offer and to see if it would work. And it worked at those numbers. So now I've gotten all these bids, So
okay.
We got a paving quote for like 117,000. So we're well under our budget as far as the initial underwriting,
But that doesn't include the infill, right?
No, that's not including the infill.
That's not including the infill. Got it. Okay.
So the plan is to bring in new homes.
Okay.
So
Well, listen, that's always, if you could bring new homes into the community, that also adds value, right? Yeah. It's especially if it, that's why you want to look at that market. It's a new home market. You could bring in new homes. It just adds some shine to the community as a whole and helps raise the value for the existing homeowners.
Yeah.
Okay. John, what's next for you, or how could people reach you if they want to find out more about what you're doing or hear about your next project?
They can send me an email, jevans@sixrockprop.com. That's the letter J, EVANS @sixrockprop.com.
And are you giving out any courses on how to speak to how to find deals off market? Talk to mom and pop.
I've thought about it. I would do it. I've had people reach out and ask questions. I'm happy to answer questions and pass along my experience and what I would do and what I wouldn't do.
Okay. Listen, it's a valuable tool. But what I take out of this, and for those of you listening, if you're going to go look for off market opportunities, remember, it's not about what you want. It's about what you can offer, right? Yeah. So make sure that you're offering value to that person that you're speaking to, whether it's being a resource, sharing information, letting them know that you're a neighbor if you own a community in town. That's super important. And another key takeaway I've gotten from this episode is, if you're interested in the space, you just got to dive in, right? So you've got to either, dive in yourself, right, and get your feet wet, or like what you did was you found a partner who was a little bit more experienced, and you kind of leveraged that to be part of that wheel where, you can learn and be part of it. And now you're able to do your own thing as well. Right. So there's two different paths, and you can take both of them and be very, very successful with it. And John, you've obviously been very successful, and I'm very appreciative of you reaching out. And I was glad to have met you. And listen, I'm looking forward to working with you on a deal. So I want to thank you for being part of the MHP Exchange podcast. And if you're out there listening and you have a deal, or you want information on a deal that you're working on, reach out to us at the MHPExchange.com. Send us an email. You could ask a question. We'd be happy to answer that. Additionally, if you want to see what it takes to really turn around a community, check out our YouTube page at Trailer Park Turnaround, and you can get a video series of Eric and myself of what we do to turn around some of these communities that I'm sure John has purchased communities just like that. But definitely take a look at the YouTube channel. And if you like this program, share it with a friend. Until next time, everybody, happy investing.